Have you ever wondered why relationships sometimes feel like a struggle, no matter how much effort you put in? What if I told you that true love and meaningful connections don't have to be about constant seeking or fixing, but rather about deep self-awareness? In Stoic philosophy, we learn that love isn't about finding someone to complete us. It's about understanding ourselves first, embracing our flaws, and living with intention. Authenticity in a relationship comes not from needing constant validation from your partner, but from the internal strength to be yourself fully. Today, we'll explore how applying Stoic principles can unlock not just the ability to attract the right person, but also to build a lasting, meaningful connection. These principles have the power to transform your relationships into something stable and fulfilling. Stick around, because in the next few minutes, I'll share Stoic secrets that will change the way you approach love forever. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official for more insights into building meaningful relationships. Number 1. Emotions are not the enemy. I remember a time when I was deeply frustrated in a relationship. I loved her, but there were moments of tension that seemed impossible to navigate. There were emotional outbursts, sometimes from me, sometimes from her. At times, it felt like emotions were a wall between us, keeping us from truly understanding each other. It wasn't until I stumbled upon Stoic philosophy that I understood that emotions aren't the enemy. They're the signal we often ignore. In Stoic wisdom, we're taught to approach our emotions not with fear or avoidance, but with understanding and self-reflection. Emotions in themselves are neither good nor bad. They are natural responses to the world around us. The Stoics knew this, and they believed the key is not to suppress emotions, but to manage them in a way that aligns with our values and our purpose. Take, for example, the famous Stoic, Epictetus, who said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." In the context of a relationship, this could not be more true. It's not the feeling of jealousy, anger, or frustration that causes the harm. It's how we let those emotions dictate our behavior. In my past relationship, I would react impulsively, letting frustration cloud my judgment. I'd make decisions out of anger or fear, pushing her further away. And each time, the cycle repeated. The problem wasn't the emotions themselves, but my lack of control over them. In a healthy Stoic relationship, we don't allow our emotions to control us. Instead, we learn to pause, reflect, and understand the root of our feelings. What is anger really telling us? Perhaps it's a feeling of not being understood. What is jealousy revealing? Maybe a deep-seated fear of losing something valuable. In Stoicism, we have the power to create space between stimulus and response. That space is where wisdom resides. By becoming aware of our emotions and the beliefs driving them, we have the chance to decide how to act, not based on automatic reactions, but on a thoughtful, aligned response that respects both our partner and ourselves. For example, if we feel hurt by something our partner does, instead of lashing out in anger, we can use Stoic mindfulness. We acknowledge the hurt, but then we ask ourselves, what is this situation teaching me about myself and my relationship? We use that moment to grow, to communicate openly, and to navigate the issue with a clear and calm mind, grounded in our true values. Through this process, we learn that our emotions can be powerful allies when we don't let them rule us. They guide us toward self-awareness and greater intimacy. As Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wisely said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." The quality of our thoughts in response to emotions, whether in love or in life, determines how deeply we connect with others. So the next time you find yourself swept away by a surge of emotion, remember this. Emotions are not your enemy. They are a tool, a guide. Your response, however, is in your hands. By practicing the principles of Stoicism, you can transform your emotions from barriers to bridges in your relationship, leading you to a deeper, more meaningful connection. And this, my friend, is the secret to love and connection that transcends the superficial. It's the Stoic way, living intentionally, emotionally aware, and authentically with those you care about. Number 2. Reaction or reflection. In my younger years, I had a habit of reacting. It was almost instinctual. Something would happen, a conflict would arise, and I would immediately act on my emotions. This reactionary behavior often leads to regret, especially in relationships. I remember one heated argument with my girlfriend where I let my frustration take over. She had said something that felt hurtful, and without thinking, I fired back. My words were sharp, my tone harsh. At that moment, I wasn't being the man I wanted to be. I wasn't thinking about the long-term consequences of my actions. I was reacting, not reflecting. The aftermath was uncomfortable. She pulled away, and I was left with a sense of emptiness. It was only later, after calming down, that I realized the mistake I had made. I had let my emotions lead me, and in doing so, I missed an opportunity to respond with wisdom, to reflect rather than react. In Stoic philosophy, we are taught the importance of reflection over reaction. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." This statement isn't just about thoughts, it's about the process through which we choose to respond to life's challenges, particularly in relationships. Imagine this. You're in the middle of an argument with your partner. Your emotions are high, and every fiber of your being wants to lash out. The Stoic approach would suggest this. Pause. Step back, take a breath, and reflect. Instead of reacting impulsively, you assess the situation. What does this disagreement really mean? Why does it matter? Is the hurt you're feeling worth damaging the connection you have with your partner? In those moments of emotional intensity, we have two choices: to react or to reflect. A reaction is driven by impulse, by the heat of the moment. It often leads to damage, words said in haste, actions that can't be undone. Reflection, on the other hand, is driven by reason. It's the ability to step back, examine your emotions, and choose how you want to respond in a way that aligns with your values and your deeper understanding of love and connection. Seneca, another prominent Stoic, once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." When we react without reflection, we amplify our suffering, making it worse than it needs to be. We allow our fears, our insecurities, and our emotions to control us. But when we take the time to reflect, we realize that most of our pain is temporary, and we can address the root causes of it with calmness and clarity. The key to meaningful connections in a relationship is not in avoiding conflict, but in how we handle it. If you find yourself constantly reacting to your partner's actions or words, you're creating a cycle of conflict that never resolves. But when you choose reflection over reaction, you open the door to healthier, more thoughtful conversations. You create an environment where both partners feel heard, valued, and respected. This was a lesson I learned the hard way. In my relationship, as soon as I embraced the idea of reflection, of pausing before I spoke or acted, I saw a shift. The tension that once marked our arguments started to dissolve. We began to communicate more effectively, with empathy and understanding. Instead of reacting out of hurt or frustration, we started reflecting on our feelings, understanding each other's perspectives, and coming to resolutions with mutual respect. In the end, this Stoic principle, reflection over reaction, is not just about controlling emotions, but about mastering ourselves. As the Stoics taught, the ultimate goal is to achieve inner peace, and that begins with the way we respond to life's challenges, especially in love. The next time you face a difficult situation with your partner, remember to take a moment to reflect. The response you choose will define the future of your relationship. Number 3. Knowing what's in your control and what's not there was a time in my relationship when I couldn't let go. My girlfriend at the time had changed in ways I couldn't fully understand. She was distant and less engaged, and it felt as if she wasn't putting as much effort into us as I was. I started obsessing over her actions, wondering why she wasn't as affectionate, why she didn't seem as interested. I tried to fix things, to change her, but all it did was push her further away. The harder I tried to control the situation, the worse it became. It wasn't until I took a step back and reflected on my actions that I understood that I was trying to control something I couldn't. I couldn't control how she felt, nor could I dictate her actions. What I could control was how I responded to the situation. This lesson is deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy, where understanding what is in our control and what isn't is central to achieving inner peace. The Stoics, like Epictetus, taught us that we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. This idea is especially important in relationships. When you are invested in someone, it's easy to forget that you can't force someone to feel or act a certain way. You can't control their emotions, their desires, or their actions. You can only control your own. In my case, I had been so trying to change my girlfriend's behavior, hoping that it would make her love me more, that I lost sight of what I could control: my own actions and emotions. I began to realize that the way I responded to her actions, whether with anger, disappointment, or frustration, was entirely within my control. I didn't need to let her behavior dictate my peace of mind. I could choose to act with patience, understanding, and compassion, rather than reacting from a place of fear and insecurity. In a relationship, you might face situations where you feel like you're losing control. Maybe your partner isn't as attentive as they used to be, or they're not putting in the effort you expect. The Stoic wisdom here is clear. Don't try to control your partner's actions. Instead, focus on controlling your own responses. It's not easy, but it is empowering. As Marcus Aurelius wisely said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In practical terms, this means accepting that you can't change how your partner behaves, but you can choose how you react. If your partner is distant or uncommunicative, instead of forcing a conversation or becoming upset, ask yourself, how can I handle this situation with grace? How can I show my partner that I care without being controlling? Maybe it's giving them space, or perhaps it's approaching them with kindness and patience. This lesson helped me transform my relationship. Once I understood that I could control my own actions and emotions, I found peace. Instead of worrying about how she was feeling or trying to fix things that were beyond my control, I focused on being the best partner I could be. I showed respect, understanding, and unconditional support. In turn, it allowed her to feel safe and loved, and our bond grew stronger. The essence of Stoicism is not about suppressing your emotions, but about learning how to respond to them with wisdom and composure. Relationships thrive when both partners focus on what they can control: their own growth, their own peace, and their own actions. If you remember what's in your control and what's not, you'll find that love becomes less about managing others and more about mastering yourself. Number 4. Minimizing dependence on external validation. A few years ago, I found myself caught in a cycle that I couldn't escape. I was in a relationship where I constantly sought approval from my girlfriend. Every action, every decision was influenced by how I thought she might perceive me. I wanted her to be proud of me, to show me affection, and to validate my worth. And yet, no matter how much I did or how much I tried, it never felt like enough. I was dependent on her reactions, her love, and her words for my own happiness. One evening, after a small argument, I had a moment of clarity. As we sat there, both silent, I realized I was giving her power over my emotions. I was letting my sense of self-worth hinge entirely on her validation. The more I sought her approval, the more distant I became from my own sense of inner peace. I didn't like what I saw. The Stoic teachings began to echo in my mind. It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. It was clear. My constant need for validation was disturbing my peace. In Stoicism, there's a simple yet powerful concept. We are in control of our thoughts, actions, and reactions, but we cannot control how others feel or react. The ancient philosopher Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only thing you cannot have unless you give it to others." What he meant was that when we depend on others for our happiness or validation, we surrender our freedom. We give away our power to feel content, to feel at peace, and to feel whole. This was the trap I had fallen into. The issue wasn't that I needed affection or love from my partner. It was that I had attached my self-worth to her approval. I thought her validation would make me feel loved and secure, but in reality, it only left me feeling insecure and restless. This dependency on external validation made me forget the most important lesson. Our worth comes from within, not from someone else's praise or acknowledgement. As I reflected on this, I remembered another Stoic teaching. What is external is not up to us. What is internal is. In relationships, we cannot control how our partners will respond to us. We can't make them love us, appreciate us, or praise us when we want. But what we can control is how we value ourselves and how we respond to situations. Instead of depending on someone else's approval to define my worth, I realized that I needed to focus on strengthening my self-validation. In practical terms, this meant shifting my focus away from how my girlfriend saw me and instead focusing on my own growth. I took time to reflect on my actions, my goals, and what truly made me happy, not based on her opinion, but based on my values. I started setting boundaries and practicing self-compassion, recognizing that I deserved love and respect, not because someone else affirmed it, but because I recognized it within myself. This shift wasn't easy. The temptation to seek external validation can be overwhelming, especially when we are in love. But the more I practiced Stoic principles, understanding that my happiness is rooted in my own perceptions and choices, the more I realized that love in its truest form is not about seeking approval, but about building a connection where both partners support each other in becoming the best versions of themselves. The lesson here is that love should not be a reflection of your worth in someone else's eyes. Instead, it should be a partnership where both individuals bring their full selves to the table without relying on constant validation. This is the path to true freedom and peace in love, where both partners can thrive independently and together as equals. Number 5. Love and forgiveness. There was a time when I felt wrong in my relationship. My girlfriend and I had been together for a couple of years, and like most relationships, there were ups and downs. But one argument stood out, a misunderstanding that led to harsh words and hurt feelings. We both said things in the heat of the moment, things that couldn't be taken back. I remember how deeply hurt I felt by what she had said, and how, in my own pride, I refused to forgive her for a long time. I held on to that resentment, believing that if I didn't, I would be protecting myself. It wasn't until I found myself growing distant, both emotionally and physically, that I realized how much that anger was affecting me. It wasn't about protecting myself anymore. It was about allowing that bitterness to dictate my emotions, to take control of my peace. And then I remembered a Stoic principle that I had learned long ago. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. I was suffering not because of what happened, but because I had allowed my thoughts to turn the incident into something much bigger than it truly was. I had allowed my hurt to spiral into something that was consuming me, and in turn, damaging the love we shared. The Stoics teach us that holding on to resentment is like holding a burning coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. It's you who gets burned. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, isn't about excusing someone's bad behavior, but about releasing the hold that resentment has on you. By holding on to anger, we give away our peace, and by forgiving, we regain our freedom. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This idea of transcending the wrong done to us resonated deeply with me. Instead of letting the negative energy from the argument rule my emotions, I began to ask myself, what is in my control here? The answer was simple: my response. I couldn't change what she said or did, but I could choose how I would move forward. I could choose peace, and in choosing peace, I could choose to forgive. Forgiveness, in a Stoic sense, isn't a grand gesture or a deep emotional reconciliation. It's a practice of letting go of the control we think we have over others' actions. Forgiveness is freeing. It's not about letting someone off the hook, but about freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying the weight of anger. In relationships, love and forgiveness are intertwined. Love, true love, isn't conditional. It doesn't depend on the other person being perfect. It's about accepting flaws, forgiving mistakes, and choosing to move forward together. This, too, is part of what it means to be a Stoic. It's understanding that the world is not always fair, that people make mistakes, and that we are all works in progress. To hold someone's past against them is to deny the possibility of growth, both in them and in yourself. In the end, the real lesson I took from that moment was that love without forgiveness is incomplete. Without forgiveness, love becomes a prison, and the bond we seek to nurture can only grow if we let go of past wrongs. So I forgave her, not for her sake, but for my own peace. and in doing so, I freed both of us to grow together without the weight of resentment holding us back. As I reflect on this, I remember another Stoic truth. What happens is not as important as how you respond. Our relationships are made up of imperfect moments, but it's how we respond to those moments that define the strength of our bond. Love, true love, is built on understanding, forgiveness, and the willingness to rise above mistakes, both our own and others. Number 6. Patience and understanding in relationships. There was a time in my relationship when I found myself constantly frustrated. I was dating someone who, like everyone, had their own way of doing things, but there were moments when her actions didn't align with my expectations. For example, I remember one time when I planned a special evening for us, only for her to cancel at the last minute. My first instinct was to react, feeling hurt, upset, and even angry. At that moment, I wanted to demand an explanation, to express my frustration at the inconvenience and the disappointment I felt. But then, I took a step back and remembered a key Stoic lesson. It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them. In other words, what caused me distress wasn't the cancellation itself, but how I chose to interpret it. I realized that my need to control the situation and my expectations were the true sources of my frustration. Instead of reacting immediately, I decided to pause, breathe, and approach the situation with patience and understanding. Patience, as the Stoics teach, isn't just about waiting without complaint. It's about understanding that some things are beyond our control. In relationships, we often want everything to unfold as we imagine it. We set expectations, and when those expectations are unmet, we feel disappointed. But the Stoic philosophy reminds us that we can't control the actions of others. What we can control, however, is how we respond. Marcus Aurelius said, "How much time you're going to waste when you take offense at another's actions." In relationships, taking offense not only wastes time, but also fosters unnecessary conflict. Instead of letting my emotions dictate my actions, I learned to ask myself, what's in my control here? I couldn't change her decision, but I could choose to be patient and understanding. I could approach the situation with an open mind, acknowledging that she might have had a valid reason for canceling, perhaps something outside of her control. With patience, I gave her space to explain, and when she did, I listened without judgment. This wasn't just an opportunity for her to be heard, but for me to practice understanding. When we focus on understanding, we create space for growth in our relationships. We also remove the burden of resentment, which can only fester if we choose to react impulsively. The lesson here from a Stoic perspective is that we must focus not on what others do, but on how we respond. Patience is not passive, it's an active choice to control our reactions. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." In relationships, this freedom comes from understanding that our partner's actions are not a reflection of our worth, nor do they dictate our happiness. We have the power to choose our response. By practicing patience, I learned that sometimes it's not about fixing the situation right away, but about giving it time to unfold naturally. Understanding that each person comes with their own challenges and their own set of circumstances helps us see them for who they truly are, flaws and all. Instead of reacting from a place of ego or frustration, we can approach our relationships with empathy. In the end, I realized that relationships are built on understanding, and understanding takes time. Patience allows us to step outside our own expectations and truly see the other person. It lets us embrace their imperfections and continue to grow together. When we practice patience and understanding, we foster an environment where love can thrive, free from the constraints of judgment and expectation. So if you find yourself frustrated in a relationship, remember, patience isn't about waiting. It's about choosing to respond with grace, understanding, and love, knowing that you control your peace. And when you master that, you'll find that relationships become deeper, more meaningful, and more resilient. Number 7. Emotional resilience in relationships. In the early days of my relationship, there was a moment that truly tested my emotional resilience. It was after a particularly intense argument. My partner had said something that stung deeply. I felt misunderstood, even rejected. At that moment, The weight of my emotions threatened to overpower me. I wanted to respond in anger, to retaliate with hurtful words, or withdraw completely. But I remembered something I had recently read from the Stoic philosophers. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. This idea from Seneca made me pause and question my immediate reaction. In that instant, I realized my mind was amplifying the hurt. I wasn't just upset by what was said. I was imagining worst-case scenarios and emotional consequences that hadn't even happened yet. This was the essence of what the Stoics call premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of troubles. It's when we allow our fears to magnify a situation, often creating emotional turmoil that isn't rooted in reality. I took a breath. I remembered that in relationships, it's not always the words or actions that hurt us the most, but how we respond to them. "The obstacle is the way," said Marcus Aurelius. At that moment, the obstacle wasn't the hurtful words or the argument itself. The obstacle was my emotional reaction. I realized that I could choose how to respond. Instead of reacting impulsively, I decided to take a step back and reflect. What followed was a shift in how I approached the situation. I didn't suppress my feelings, but I chose to understand them before acting on them. Stoicism teaches us that our thoughts shape our emotions, and our emotions shape our actions. In this case, I chose to see the situation as an opportunity to grow, not as a reason to withdraw or retaliate. I understood that emotional resilience isn't about denying our feelings. It's about understanding and managing them. I decided to communicate calmly, acknowledging my hurt without letting it control my behavior. I expressed how I felt, but with the understanding that my partner wasn't intentionally trying to hurt me. I remembered that relationships require patience and perspective. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants, said Epictetus. In relationships, emotional resilience is the wealth of patience, having the patience to listen, to understand, and to respond thoughtfully. As the conversation progressed, it became clear that the issue was rooted in a misunderstanding, not malice. We were both tired, and in the heat of the moment, we had failed to communicate our feelings effectively. We learned that we both had a responsibility to express our emotions clearly and to approach each other with empathy. What I took away from this experience was a deeper understanding of the role emotional resilience plays in relationships. It isn't just about enduring hardship, it's about maintaining control over how we respond to the inevitable challenges that arise. In Stoicism, we learn that we cannot control external events, but we can control our responses to them. The ability to remain calm, thoughtful, and composed in the face of adversity is what builds strong, lasting relationships. In your relationships, remember that emotional resilience isn't just about reacting calmly when things go wrong. It's about choosing to rise above your emotions, not allowing them to dictate your behavior. With emotional resilience, you can face challenges together, not as adversaries, but as partners growing stronger through adversity. Ultimately, the lesson I learned was simple but profound. Emotional resilience is not a passive trait. It's a practice. By practicing it, we build a foundation of trust, understanding, and love that can weather any storm. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. As we reflect on the lessons of emotional resilience, patience, and understanding in relationships, it's clear that the foundation of any strong relationship lies in how we choose to respond. In relationships, as in life, challenges are inevitable. But how we navigate those challenges defines the strength of our connection. I encourage you to take action today. Practice patience, understand your emotions, and choose resilience in your own relationships. Start small, acknowledge your feelings before reacting, and see how it transforms your interactions. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear how these Stoic principles are shaping your relationships. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official. Tomorrow's video will bring even more insights into building a life of peace and strength through Stoic philosophy. Take control of your thoughts, and you'll take control of your relationships. See you in the next video.